Hi, I'm Gary Churgin. I'm president and CEO of the Harry Fox Agency. We're located here in New York City, and we represent approximately 27,000 of the music publishers and their copyrights in the United States. Our role in the world of music is to license the intellectual property that's created by the songwriters. That intellectual property are the lyrics and the notes that you as musicians play, and we license the right to manufacture and distribute those things to other users like record companies and websites. And in turn, we collect the royalties from them and distribute those royalties back to the publishers and they in turn to the songwriters. There, in fact, was a guy named Harry Fox. I've never met him. He's long dead, but apparently between 75 and 80 years ago, when people needed a license, they would go to the trade association that preceded the National Music Publishers Association, of which we are a wholly owned subsidiary, and I'll explain how that works in a moment. They would go and Harry Fox was working for the then trade association, and he would issue the licenses. And what became over time was, instead of them referring to it as a mechanical license, they referred to it as a Harry Fox. I need to go get a Harry Fox. We tried to change that, and you don't need a Harry Fox. You need a mechanical license. And it started with, as I said to you before, and have explained before, it started with all these different sorts of technology, if you will, or representations in terms of how the songs and the lyrics are used, and the music as well. And this all started back in Tin Pan Alley up in the Brill Building over near Times Square, and in that building there were all these publishers and musicians and songwriters would come in and play their stuff, and the publisher would say, "Yep, I'll sign you, and we'll represent your copyrights, and we'll go to different music stores where they sell sheet music, to Sam Ash and to others, and that's how it started." Well, there are others. First of all, Harry Fox does not have an exclusive licensing relationship with music publishers. That's number one. So a publisher does not have to go through Harry Fox to get their works licensed. And on the other side of the coin, a record company does not need to come to Harry Fox. It can go to the publisher directly as well. So what we are is we're this big, large clearinghouse where we represent most of the stuff that's out there. But there are other companies that administer copyrights and deal with on a direct basis and offer some of the services that Harry Fox may have. One of the things that we do that has great value to the songwriters and to the publishers is that compliance examination that I talked to you about. It's very, very expensive to go and bring in a team of accountants to go in and evaluate the books of one of our licensed users, and that's expensive. And for an individual to be able to go and do that, it's not so easy. And we have substantial resources that are out there to be able to go and do those things on behalf of our publishers. And any recoveries, audit recoveries or examination recoveries that we do, that gets distributed down to our publishers, and they in turn to the songwriters. So, so it's a very valuable thing that we're able to offer because we are very large. But one of the things that I left out when I was talking about sort of the history of Harry Fox and its purpose, Harry Fox, as I said to you before, is owned by the National Music Publishers Association, which is a trade association of music publishers, both independent music publishers as well as major music publishers. And when we describe somebody as a major music publisher, it's not necessarily the size of the company, it's the fact that they're affiliated with one of the large record companies. And we have a board of directors of 18, and our principle, our raison d'etre, our reason for being is to be able to, through the commissions that we collect, provide the funding which supports the efforts of the trade association. And what the trade association does, and which is a very important, a vital thing that it does for the music industry as a whole, as well as publishers and songwriters in particular, is through legislation and through litigation, we protect the copyrights, the value of the copyrights to the copyright owners. So the NMPA is out there very aggressively supporting in Washington the rights, and to make sure that the rights of the creators are in fact protected. And so our real job, if you will, is to be able to provide the economic resources to mount the legislative campaigns down in Washington, which, as we all know, are very expensive, as well as to mount the litigation that we're involved with. We were one of the complainants, our publishers, not Harry Fox or the NMPA, but our publishers were some of the principal complainants, as well as the record companies and the motion picture studios, in the Grokster case, which went all the way to the Supreme Court and supported our position on peer-to-peer and the implications of that the software that was being offered to the consumer, in fact, contributed in a very significant way to a copyright infringement. Mm-hmm. And so those are the things that we do, and whatever profit that we were ever to really have, because we really don't run at a profit, we send all them, let me rephrase that. The profit that we're able to generate, in fact, goes right to the trade association and to all those important things that support songwriters, that support publishers, that support musicians, that support artists, and all of the folks in the musical food chain, engineers, all of those things. They're all integral. So interwoven that we do just doesn't help the people we necessarily represent on a direct basis, but have a much broader base as well. The musicians need to care about whether or not they want to be affiliated either with Harry Fox directly or with a publisher if they've in fact are composers as well, and that they want their compositions to be used, licensed and used by others for covers, as was mentioned before, so that's when it becomes important, so that in fact your works can be exploited. The role of a publisher is in fact to go out and find, get people to go and use your music and record it, and for a variety of uses. And and that's their principal job, to act on behalf of the singer-songwriter and songwriters in general, and so that they can be really focused on the creative process while somebody is worrying about the exploitation process, if you will. And so either their publisher will be affiliated with us, hopefully, mm-hmm. or if they do their own publishing, then that's when it's time to sign up.
What's the price of affiliation? Is that something that's
The affiliation price is free. The only thing that you have to do is you have to have had one commercially released song, and if you can demonstrate that you've got that, then you're good to go. There are a lot of ways to learn about Harry Fox. There are books that have been written, of course. There are, which are all around here. And there's also the Harry Fox website, www.harryfox.com. And there is both a private side, if you will, and a public side of the site. The private side of the site is to be used by users that have registered with us, as well as publishers, to monitor their licenses, to monitor their income and things like that. And there's also another piece of the site which is on the public side of the site, which is our song, which is our offering to the public, which is Songfile, and that's if you want to go and create a CD, if you will, or even a DPD. In the CD area, the maximum number of copies is 2,500, and so you can go online, literally online, and create a basket of songs that you want to be able to use. check out, give us your credit card online, and you're good to go in terms of all the songs that we represent, or the portion of the songs that we represent. One of the things that I did not explain in the beginning is that there is not always necessarily one owner to a song. The lyricist may own a piece, the composer may own a piece, they may be represented by two different publishers, and so they each get paid. And in order for you to be able to use that song, you have to get both pieces cleared, if you will. So, and in many cases, Harry Fox represents all of the pieces, and there are some cases where we don't represent all the pieces. And then you, as the user, have to go and find those other pieces, find out who the publishers are, and then go and cut the deal, if you will, directly with them. But we have over 1 million songs in our database that you can go and sort of cruise the database and pick what you want to license, and you're good to go. Well, it's really for your own personal consumption. I think that's really the best and easiest way to explain that. Anything more than that in terms of exploitation really requires a license to be granted and royalties to be paid. I mean, I think one of the things that we always forget is that there's somebody sitting in some garret someplace with a blank piece of paper where they're writing lyrics and composing some music, and they should be fairly compensated. And so I think we're all very careful about sort of the rigor that's applied to what's fair use and what's not. And I think there were a lot of issues. I'm certainly not an attorney, but in terms of how people were looking at P2P, that they felt that there was some fair use. Well, I think it was kind of hard to sort of rationalize that you really knew all 25,000 people as your close personal friends who happen to be on that particular P2P network. So it's personal use is fair use. Harry Fox does not promote any artist songs. We represent everyone in an even way, if you will. What we do and what we monitor is to make sure, A, that the songs are licensed, and then B, that they're properly reported, that we get the proper sales reports, and that we're paid, and that's done on a quarterly basis. And we make sure that, in fact, that the publisher and in turn the songwriter is getting paid what they're supposed to be getting paid as per the license. So we track that the licenses have been issued to make sure that we don't have unlicensed works out there. Then after we know that it's licensed, Harry Fox then tracks the sales using things like SoundScan, which you see in Billboard, and using those kinds of tools. We track the sales, and then we know basically what the record company, or the user, if you will, because it's not always a record company, what they should be paying us. And if they don't pay us enough based on that information, then we go back in a more aggressive way and say, hey, wait a second, you only gave us X, it should have been X, X plus 30, pay up. And then finally, what we do from a compliance perspective to make sure that on an ongoing basis we've been paid properly, we go out and we do compliance examinations of the record companies or the users. And the reason I say the users, because now it's not just record companies who typically come to Harry Fox, but we also have subscription services that are out there on the internet that use our client's product as well. So we then go and have examinations on a periodic basis. We review their books, we review the sales figures, and so we make sure that in fact they did in fact pay us the right amount, so we in turn can pay the publishers, who in turn pay the songwriters. I think yes, in two ways. One, as I said to you before, is that if a musician becomes a composer and a songwriter, in order to have their rights exploited, in this space, it's important to go through Harry Fox or through someone, so that you in fact are protected, and that your works are licensed and you get paid. So from that perspective, yes, I think it's very important. Then the other is if you're just as a musician, if you now decide that you want to do covers and and put together your own album, you need to come to Harry Fox to get a license. So either depending upon whether or not you're a holder of the rights or you want to be a user of the rights, you still come through. Harry Fox is a great place for you to come through and have that stuff handled. I've been at Harry Fox. It's now just 5 years. And before I was at Harry Fox, I happened to have been in banking, I guess for about 13 years. And I was involved in a lot of very different things in banking, including launching an internet product for the institutional bank that I worked for. In addition to that, and all the jobs that I've had are really jobs that gave me experience and the tools to be effective here at Harry Fox, whether it's learning about technology, whether it's learning about customer service, whether it's learning about introducing innovation and change. Those are the kinds of things. And I have to tell you, working here at Fox, at HFA, you get a sort of a very different perspective. And I was very lucky. I guess it was within the first 4 or 5 months I was working here. I was afforded the opportunity to go down to Nashville, and I was invited to a songwriter's house to have a guitar pull. And so basically sitting in the living room were about 10 or 15 songwriters with their guitars, and they were playing the music that they were working on that day in the studio. And I was absolutely in awe. I mean, because this was stuff that had been created, today. And what I realized was that I had a great responsibility to the songwriters and to the publishers, because that's their heart, that's their soul, and to the musicians as well, and that I have a responsibility to them to make sure that their rights are protected and that they're compensated appropriately for that. And I got to tell you, the hair on the back of my neck sort of stood up, and I remember calling my wife, who was up here at home in New York, and I said to her, I'm in the middle of American culture. I'm really a part of it, although not from a creative perspective, and sort of not really on the fringes, but part of it in terms of making sure that the creators get what they're supposed to get. And it's a huge, huge responsibility that I have, and that all of the HFA team has. It's not just me. I mean, there are 130 people that are behind me, in front of me, and around me who are supporting and servicing the publishers, the songwriters, and we have a huge responsibility. It's almost a moral responsibility, and almost a moral imperative to make sure that they're in no way disadvantaged or taken advantage of, whether it's through theft, whether it's through underpayment, whatever it might be. We have an obligation to them, because if the creators of the music can't eat and can't live, then they have to go do something else, and that would create just a huge void in our daily lives. There are many rights that are associated with the copyright that relates to music, if you will. There are many rights, but I think maybe the best way to sort of describe things is from a historical perspective of mechanical rights, and we truly were mechanical because a very long time ago, over 75 years ago, the music publishers realized that there was, in fact, through the player piano, which is what this reel is. It's I don't even know what the year is on this, but this was a long time ago, and that this was a way for songs to be replicated and again and again and again, and sold to people who own and used player pianos. And so I think that's how they came up with, but you can't quote me, in terms of a mechanical device. So it started with this, along with the publishers in effect, plugging the songs of the songwriters with local bands, and that's sort of where music publishing started, was exactly with that. So here is in fact the notes, and in this case there are no words. There don't seem to be any words with any of these, but this is the intellectual property that we in fact license. And what's really sort of interesting is that through the history of music in the United States and in the world, as we understand it in modern times, if you will, over the last 100 years, the music industry has worked very, very well in terms of adapting to new technology. So moving from the player piano to here's Thomas Edison's picture, to the wax cylinder. This particular song is on the banks of Lovelight Bay, Helen Clark and Randolph, and this is played on that device back there, and this was what Thomas Edison invented in terms of the cylinder, and so it then moved to that. That was another bit of technology that the music industry was able to embrace very successfully. And then, of course, we moved to the LP, to vinyl. But before vinyl, it was shellac. And so this was the next bit of technology that, again, the music industry was able to successfully embrace and advanced the consumption of music, if you will, and the broad distribution of music. Then we sort of really have a bit of a big jump. We move from the next level, which is something that's more recent. What I should also have had was a cassette and both an 8-track as well as a regular cassette. And then we moved from there, which were around a little bit less time than the LP was, but then we moved to the CD, and that had been around for a bit of time. And then we moved to the PC, the desktop, for digital music, and we've gone from this sort of cumbersome device where people are sort of sitting there with their PCs, listening to music, enjoying music, and downloading, and then we're here, the latest, the latest and the greatest. But this isn't really the latest, and it's not really the end of the road. The next thing is the cell phone in terms of being the next platform for the acquisition and the playing of music, and for folks like us to be able to listen to music. But in each one of these cases, the use of the intellectual property, the copyright itself, has been used in all of these, and the publishers and the songwriters have gotten paid through each one of these sort of evolutionary and revolutionary in technologies. I mean, up until now, we've never had a situation where we've been threatened by technology, but in fact, through illegal uses of peer-to-peer, we've in fact been hurt very, very seriously. The songwriters, the publishers, the artists, the musicians, everybody who's in the music food chain, if you will, have been negatively impacted by the theft. To refer to as piracy, I think, is a little too glamorous, but the out-and-out theft of the music, and it's the stealing of the rights of our clients, the publishers, and in turn the songwriters. In terms of the musicians are our clients, the case where the musician themselves is actually the creator, is a composer, and or writes the lyrics as well. It's those cases where they become clients of Harry Fox, either directly or through a third party, a publisher themselves. And so it's in that area where we're out there supporting the exploitation, and I use the word exploitation in a very positive way, to make sure that that the music is used and paid for. What Fox does is represent those rights on behalf of the rights owners or the rights holders, to make sure that in fact they do get licensed and they do in fact get paid. So that's our job. We're sort of like the Internal Revenue Service of the music industry, representing the publishers and the songwriters, for mechanical rights only, of course, and that's the right to manufacture and to distribute ultimately for sale for these things. And right now, through the copyright law, which is in place, there is a statutory rate that basically says and guarantees, in effect, that there is a maximum which one can pay for the use of that song. And right now, effective this past January 1st, is 9.1 cents. And so the maximum a user can, and that user could be a record company, it can be a community group, whatever, they have to pay 9.1 cents, in terms of the maximum. They can, of course, go and negotiate with the music publisher or the person who controls the publishing rights for that for some number that's less. But there is, in fact, a cap after the first use of the song of 9.1 cents. Basically, a straight mechanical license use, or where the publishers, in fact, have rights that are other than the typical phono recording, which is covered under statute. I mean, there are other uses, in fact, that folks get paid for. One is in master tones and ringbacks. That's the stuff that, the music that you have on your cell phone every time somebody calls you. That's the master tone. And then you also have the second piece, which is when instead of you hearing the phone ring, you hear the music of the person that you're calling. And so in those cases, the publishers and then the songwriters, in fact, get paid. And we've issued those kinds of licenses as well. For those uses, and then also for a digital download, which is what gets on this and what gets on this, we issue the licenses for those things as well. The pricing is the same for a download and a download here. But the license, you have to get a separate license. That's all. There are several uses which are available for licensing that relates to the lyrics and the lyrics and the musical notes. Of course, we have the mechanical, which Harry Fox handles. Then they have what they call a performance right, and the performance right is the right to transmit and the right to play in a public venue, or even for a jukebox to be playing in a bar. There is a performance royalty that gets paid to the three in the United States. There are three principal performing rights organizations. The first is ASCAP, which is owned by publishers and songwriters. The second is BMI, which is owned by the broadcasters, and the third is CSAC, which is a privately owned performing rights organization. And then you get the synchronization right, which is the right to put the words and music in synchronization with a moving picture. In essence, what you see used in a commercial or on TV or in the movies. There's that right as well. Another income stream, if you will, for the songwriters and for the publishers. And so there are those other things that you typically do. Organizations like Harry Fox, exist both inside the United States and outside the United States as well. What's important for publishers and songwriters is that there are organizations like HFA and like ASCAP that exist outside the United States, which we have reciprocal agreements to ensure that the rights are in fact properly invoked and proper payment is being made. In a master tone, where you actually hear the master, you have to get the rights granted, the master rights granted, which are either controlled by the record company or controlled by the artist, and then you have to come to the music publishers to get the mechanical right, if you will, the right to use the lyrics and the notes, and through that use, that's how you get the ringtone. So the ringtone provider has to get a basket of rights. It has to get rights, and it may in fact also have to get rights from the performing rights organization as well. So in this case, it's not just a single right, but it's a basket of rights. So you have to go to different rights holders to be able to use the work. The subscription services, as we call them, are what what you can now get on the internet, like Napster, Rhapsody, AOL's music site, those kinds of things, and where the consumer right now pays a monthly fee, and then they can go and log in onto their desktop, and they can either have music streamed to them, or what we call a tethered download, which is they're able to download it, and as long as you continue to be affiliated with that particular service, the music is still available to you. If you're no longer affiliated, you can't. The song suddenly is not available on your PC, and so in terms of the subscription services, basically over the last 4.5 years, Harry Fox has offered to the subscription services the ability to get licenses for their offerings without paying us a royalty. They've paid us in advance, but and pending through negotiation or through other forms, a royalty board or whatever, then a rate would be set, and then we in turn would then pay we would be able to pay the publishers and the songwriters for that particular use. What we've developed in support of that is that because they'll come in instead of saying well, I'm looking for 15 licenses because I want to cut a CD that maybe it'll have 10 or 12 cuts on it, but we'll get 15 or 20. They come in and they say I want 300,000 licenses at a clip. And so what we've done is we've developed an automated process where they submit their requests electronically to us, and through an electronic interchange, we identify the songs that we in fact represent and are allowed to license, and we issue licenses to them on their behalf. And that was a huge technological leap in terms of the way Harry Fox licensed at that point in time. But now what's happened is, sort of taking us sort of off topic, is that we were able to take that electronic way of doing business and move into the terrestrial world, where somebody is looking, a record company is looking to release an album. We now can get requests from the record companies, again electronically, and we can pass that information back and forth. And so now, in some cases, we can issue a license instantly, either online or through this bulk process. And where it was something that took weeks and weeks and weeks to do. One of the things that I wanted to add about Harry Fox, so to give you sort of the orders of magnitude of what we do, up until about 4 years ago, on average, I guess we did somewhere between 150,000 and 200,000 licenses. Now we issue about 1 million licenses a year. And we have, in terms of licenses that are out there that we monitor, it's I guess the number is over 1 million.
It's almost up to 6 million.
We've issued 6 million licenses that are out there in some way that need to be accounted for. So that should give you sort of the orders of magnitude of what we do. There are some people here where we're their day job, and they have gigs at night that they play in clubs, or they're part of a studio band or whatever. But there are also people who have a great passion and a love for music, but will never be out there performing and earning a living off of that. But there are so many things, if you think about, that are around music that still, that can still touch you. I mean, here at HFA, we process a lot of licenses and there's a lot of paper and a lot of money and stuff like that. But, the folks here get a chance to talk to, the publishers and they know that they're a part of what's going on in the business today. That that HFA is working very, very diligently and hard to figure out ways to get all this new technology licensed, and so we really are trying to figure out what the business plan, the business program, what the business objectives are to make sure that all of this stuff makes sense. You can be a lawyer, go to law school, and then you can represent artists, you can represent publishers, you can represent songwriters, and you can be involved in protecting those rights through the intellectual property litigation that we do. So you can be an accountant who loves music. I mean our CFO is a really, is this incredible, extraordinary discographer, if you will, in terms of, what band, what cut, and he and our general counsel is and head of business affairs is similar, and to have these two guys sit in a conference room right before a meeting starts, and to hear them talking about this cut, or there'll be a little bit of a riff about a particular lyric, and then they'll just go off on what album, who's the band, and stuff like that. So your passion is not just necessarily in being the performer and being out there, but there are just so many things, whether you're an engineer in a studio. I mean, I think there are so many opportunities to be able to support that passion and be doing things where your skills are greater, whether it's accounting, whether it's law, whether it's technology. I mean, some of our IT guys have incredible loves of music. We had a guy here. He was a database administrator, and he played bass in a band. So I mean, it's in your DNA. It's in your heart, and you can still engage and indulge yourself in that, and doing a lot of very different things.